Call the meeting to order. And we'll have an opportunity for residents to speak at this point. And again, I would remind everyone, this is being recorded. Please state your name and street for the convenience of the note takers. And also, please limit your comments to 2 minutes. We have limited time. We have a lot on the agenda tonight. And if you speak longer than 2 minutes, you're just cutting into everyone else's time. So please be terse and polite. Thank you. First.
How about the weather report?
I would love the weather report. You did a great job, Keith.
Well, thank you. And hello to everyone. There's a lot of light at the end of the tunnel because I'm looking for temperatures next week to be in the 50s to up near 60. And it doesn't look like any really cold weather is going to be coming our way for the rest of the season. We'll be going into March with above normal temperatures, and, you know, we really are sincerely praying and thinking of the people in the South with no water, no electricity, pipes bursting. It's terrible down there. So we're very, very lucky up here in Maryland. Be careful tomorrow for black ice, and again on Saturday for black ice. We're going to get a real hard freeze in here. Temperatures are going to crash, especially tomorrow night. But as I said, there's a lot of nice spring-like weather coming our way. It looks like we're going to have an early spring. I know the groundhog said otherwise, but I'm saying that it's going to be an early spring with really not a whole lot of rain. So look forward to that, everybody.
We will. And we'll take your
think how lucky we are here that it's not so bad here. And another thing is, you know, what's really great is being able to have these meetings the way we do, because we probably would have had to have canceled the meeting if people were actually up there in the village office. So the best to everyone, and thank you for giving me time.
Thanks very much, as always. And I can attest that the snowdrops and daffodils are on the way. So spring is coming. Okay. So do we have resident comments?
Yes, please.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Tom. You want to go first?
Okay, whoever.
Holly, and then I'll
go. Okay. I just wanted to ask if during this meeting you could go over what the timelines are for candidates to submit their candidacy for election to the council. I don't think it's clear to the community, and I guess the election committee or someone, and I may be a little out of the loop on this, has come up with some new proposals about signature enforcement and that sort of thing. And I guess I want to make sure we're encouraging contribution from the committee, and I mean from the community, excuse me, and encouraging people to run. And I haven't seen anything go out. So if someone could tell me when the deadline is and what the process is, I'd be grateful. Thank you.
Well, I can just tell you generally the information regarding elections will be on the election committee page. I received the notice today in the mail, so you should be getting it any minute, I would guess. The call for candidates opens tomorrow, I think, and closes in a couple of weeks. I know that's vague, but it's out there. It is on the website, and it's not a secret. They have
it's tomorrow and closes March 5th.
And it will be sorry?
March 5th?
March 5th.
I think it's March 5th. Yeah.
Yeah, that's all I wanted. I didn't know you had mailed something, so thank you.
Yeah, so yes, it'll be there.
I wasn't saying anyone was being secretive. I was just to get the information.
Well, isn't the 5th is the deadline to announce your nomination, but you can submit your data later.
Right.
It's submission.
There's a deadline after
nominations.
The nominations end the 5th, and I think it's the 19th. I think is to get your information in, the disclosure form and your candidate statement after that. So you have a
Thanks,
time
Matt.
period to get nominated and then a time period to get your information in.
Thank you so much. Hey, Keith, don't forget to mute yourself.
Here, I'll take care of that right now.
Love you, Keith.
Hi, it's Tom Plotz at 7211 Delafield Street. I know you're going to have a longer discussion about the tree ordinance later in the meeting, but I don't feel like waiting around for that. So just wanted to note that there is a new house going up at the corner of Taylor and Delafield at 7200 Delafield. And after they dug the hole and laid the foundation, a crew came in and essentially clear cut the lot. So the clear cutting wasn't needed apparently to build the house. It must have been the builder's choice, but it included taking down a extremely mature tree that didn't seem to be in bad condition, that had at the base was probably 6 feet in diameter and really abutted the sidewalk. So I'm not sure how wide the village right-of-way is on Taylor Street. It may be narrower than the 50 feet, but I was just wondering if the council was aware that that tree came down. And Taylor Street looks very different now with all of the trees taken down from that site. And it does not appear that denuding of the site was necessary in order to build the new house.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments?
Hi, this is Naomi Nyerman on Quincy Street.
Hi.
I am so glad to see that the task force for the safety committee or the safety committee will be decided tonight or discussed tonight. And I want to encourage you to approve it. As someone who's one of the older residents in the neighborhood, I would like to see our safety needs addressed. And I am really impressed with the plan that was put out, including a thorough, systematic needs assessment of how the residents feel that the council can serve them best in protecting themselves, so especially during this pandemic era. So thank you so much for putting that on the agenda. And let me just state for the record that I would be very happy to serve on this task force. Thank you.
Thanks, Naomi. Anyone else?
Hey, Susan, it's Tiffany Sisnett. If others don't have their hands raised, I can't see. I want to say thanks to the Walkability folks and for the council for putting the time in that they did to help move that along. I saw the note about the safety committee, and Arthur and I have discussed this. I think I just wanted to say for the record here, looking up public health and looking up safety in our code and charter, Arthur and I came up with some different stats. And so I think just for folks to be aware that this would be something new that the council would be taking on. In the past, anything related to public health was mostly in the building code. I believe like 10 out of 12 references. So health in the pandemic sense or health in the healthcare sense is an expansion of what Martin's Additions has undertaken in the past. I look forward to hearing more about the tree ordinance. Again, something I talked to Arthur about. Just I think one of my questions now that we're tying it appears to be being tied to sediment control, also goes back to issues that were discovered in 2015 about water retention and ground wells and what happens when you there are some lots that can't handle canopy trees. So those are my comments for now. Thanks very much, you guys.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Wow. I think we're a minute ahead of schedule, so
Susan,
we're ready for Larry? Okay.
Yeah. So what Tiffany said is about, in 2006, the entire state of Maryland changed the drainage requirements for sites. And essentially, we've just now had flooding on Thornapple we never had before because of residents' failure to be aware of that. She's absolutely right. It is much more difficult. It's much more expensive and specific And maybe our village inspector can help enforce that, because that is a key issue, that how to handle that water on your site. It used to be you could drain it off elsewhere. You can't do that anymore. So it's a big issue.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, Susan, this is Jeff. Just before we transition, I had a quick question, and actually it may be more for Niles, but I know there's a few questions about the election, and I think in the past there's been an election packet. So I was just curious, is that going to happen, or are we saying that all the information around the election would be found now on the website, just for clarity in case folks were waiting for something?
Niles will address further, but it will be emailed to everyone who doesn't have, if you don't have an email address, it'll be hand delivered or mailed, USPS. Sorry.
But yes, so just to answer that question directly, so there's later information that comes out. So like once the candidates are announced, their candidate statements, all of that kind of stuff, again, officially reiterating what is in the plan, what is already in the council approved plan about dates and so on, will be sent throughout the process. So you'll get plenty of updates, both in the weekly wrap-up, in the newsletters, and various other things, and standalone messages that will tell you where we are during the election, and then how best to and then what the next step will be. So each function will have some communication around it, if that makes sense.
And that's awesome, and fully assume that you'd be on top of that, Niles, and I assume there'll be also a message for any of those folks who might be kind of on the wire or wavering. There'll be a message about submitting any candidate forms.
Right.
That's very helpful. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. I think,
Any more comments? Apparently not. Okay. So we're ready for committee updates. Do we have any committee chairs?
Susan, I can talk about election stuff.
Yes, please do.
A couple times.
Of course.
Tiffany Cisna, so the mailing that Susan referred to yesterday was a cover note that she received today, and it went out in an email last Friday. There's a cover note from the election committee saying, hey, the season is upon us. Here are the deadlines. We also included the plan that the council approved at its January meeting. So that plan includes all of the dates and times for everything from nominations period opening, nominations period closing, when candidates would be announced, when the community forum will be. So every household in Martin's Additions got this, or should be getting it via mailing. And I'm glad to know, Susan, I've heard from you and a couple others that they received theirs today. So hopefully others will get theirs tomorrow.
Right. Okay, thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, Tiffany. Really appreciate that.
Other committee chairs? If not, then I think we're ready for Doug's report, building administrator report from Doug Lohmeyer. Doug?
Good evening.
Hi.
At 6609 Brookville Road, the applicants have submitted an application to remove the existing porch and add an addition at the rear of the house. The village issued a building permit on December 7th, and the work has begun. At 7200 Delafield, the property owners submitted an application to demolish the existing house and build a new house. The village issued a building permit on January 4th. The old house has been removed, and they're beginning to pour the walls for the new basement. At 113 Quincy, the applicants have submitted an application to build a detached garage at the left rear of the house. The village issued their building permit on October 3rd, and the work is underway. At 3515 Raymond Street, the applicant submitted an application to remove the existing house and construct a new house. The village permit was issued on December 9th. They are removing this existing house and excavating for the new structure. At 3517 Shepherd, They submitted an application to make an addition to the front of the existing house. The village issued a building permit on November 24th, and that work has begun. And at 7203 Summit, the homeowners are building and replacing a detached garage at the rear of the house. That village permit was issued on February 9th. And as far as the drainage on Brookville Road, the state has been out there redoing some of the intersections, and the other day it appeared that most of the intersections are draining better than they were before, but the state still has some improvements to make as far as safety, crosswalks, and other issues. So we've been in contact with the state to try to get that work. I imagine that's going to have to wait until the weather warms up and the snow removal is behind us. And that concludes my report.
Doug, a very quick question. Is it my impression that we have an unusually large number of projects underway at this time, or does it just seem to be that way?
We've had more than usual, yes. All at one time, yes.
Okay. Everyone's out building and improving and expanding, it looks like.
Yeah.
Okay, so Doug or Niles, could you address that right-of-way issue at the 7200 Delafield and Taylor?
The tree issue. So yeah, so Doug and I looked into the placement of the tree when they started their work on the tree, and it appeared to us as if the tree was a private tree, which they have the right to, as of now, remove and so on. There are two right-of-way trees on the Taylor side there as well. You know, we've looked at those and make sure that those have not been affected by the work that they're doing. They're also doing work right now on that sidewalk corner to connect some drainage. So we are aware and looking at it, but that's sort of what when we looked at it, that's what it looked like to us from looking at the plans and everything like that. So just sort of speak to that. I don't know if you want to add more to that, Doug.
No, that's enough.
Okay. So I guess we're ready now for the Walkability final report and recommendations, the Walkability Task Force. So Peter, you're on.
Okay, Niles needs to start the presentation.
Yep, just give me 1 second here.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
We're not used to technology.
I want to make sure, yes, this is the presentation. Okay.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Thanks for coming tonight to hear about the results of the Walkability Task Force study. I'm Peter Kahn. I was chair of the task force. I'd like to introduce two of my colleagues who are on the task force who are here tonight to help present our results, Laurie Mitchell and Catherine Hampel. And I'd also like to recognize John Sharrow and Larry Wasson, committee members who worked with us all the way along, contributed many good ideas, and participated very actively in our work. So welcome to everyone. Next slide, please.
Hang on. There we go.
Okay. Okay. The Village Council appointed us to the task force in early 2020 with the mandate to assess the overall walkability of the village, to identify problems and possible solutions, and to present recommendations to the council. In doing so, we've used data about Martin's Additions, such as the traffic studies that were done a few years ago. We developed a survey to understand residents' concerns and preferences. We worked closely with our consultant and urban planner. We've met with leaders of other jurisdictions, as well as the staff of the Montgomery County Planning Department and state officials. Next slide, Niles. When the council asked us to examine the walkability of the village, it gave us a very broad definition of walkability, simply how friendly an area is to walking. We focused at first on issues of safety, traffic problems, especially on the busiest streets in the village, and we developed a focus on traffic calming, which means efforts at street design that work to slow down traffic and reduce the volume of cars coming through an area. But that definition also, in our view, allowed us to take issues of neighborhood character into account. And we came to realize that really those concerns reinforce safety considerations rather than detract from them, and can be an important part of improved safety. We also focused on obstacles to walking that are significant throughout the village. We'll be talking about all of these issues in our presentation tonight. Next slide, Niles. We made serious efforts to take attitudes of residents into account, and the principal way we did this was through a survey of residents. The survey turned out to be invaluable for us, providing us with a reasonably objective basis for making choices. We received 191 responses to the survey, which is approximately 25% of our approximately 700 adult residents, and allowed us to make inferences about community attitudes with a fairly high level of confidence. Next slide, please. This survey led us to some clear conclusions. First, a clear majority of respondents cited traffic speed and traffic volume as a major walkability concern. Indeed, it was the only issue in the survey that received clear majority support. Other issues that received strong support was the maintenance of the pedestrian infrastructure. For example, uneven and broken sidewalks, low curbs, vegetation protruding into the sidewalk area, drainage issues, and the like. Next slide, Niles. One fact that we thought was particularly interesting was that 92% of the respondents stated in the survey that they walk frequently to the village center, making Brookville Road a major concern for residents of the South End, as well as for the center of the village. Next slide, Niles. As it turned out, that issue of Brookville Road also was of great concern to residents throughout the village. Brookville Road was described by our consultant as, quote, a pedestrian nightmare, and many residents clearly agreed. Its problems are numerous and significant. The narrow sidewalk is unusually close to passing cars. The low curbs offer little protection to pedestrians. Drainage is so bad that rainstorms cause minor flooding at every Brookville intersection in the South End. There are only 2 crosswalks through the length of the village. And not only that, but it's a critical street to the village. Everyone except North End residents must walk on it to reach the village commercial center, and North End residents needed to reach Chevy Chase Park. School buses pick up and drop off kids at various points along Brookville Road. We think a council commitment to deal with Brookville is critical because it's a state road. It's not under our direct control as a community, so we must persuade the state to take this on as a project. A council commitment is critical to that, and there's a good chance that we can attract the support of our neighboring jurisdictions along Brookville Road. Next slide, please. Ideally, we think that a complete redesign of Brookville would be optimal. It would allow for higher sidewalks and a redistribution of sidewalk space to equalize the 2 sides of the road. It could deal with the persistent drainage issues. It could add stop signs and crosswalks. However, because this is a state road, we have been advised this complete redesign is unlikely. At the least, then, we feel that we should rebuild the sidewalks on the east side of Brookville, as Section 3 did on the west side several years ago, and thereby provide more safety to walkers on the Martin's Addition side. We strongly urge a phase 2 to this study, in part to address this issue in more depth, and a council commitment to improvement will be critical in making any progress. Let me now turn the discussion over to Lori Mitchell, who'll talk about some of the higher volume, higher speed streets in our village.
Thank you, Peter. And Niles, you can move to the next slide, please. Mm-hmm. And I just want to pause for a second and thank Peter for serving as chair of this task force, and Arthur, our council liaison, who sat through countless hours of meetings, and Niles, who provided invaluable help and support to the task force on more occasions than I can even count. So thank you to everyone. Now, moving along. Based on the advice of urban planner consultant Chris Jakubiak, the task force prioritized its recommendations for traffic calming installations to the most dangerous VMA streets, which share several common characteristics. Almost universally, they're used as cut-throughs for traffic coming from other neighborhoods. This is contrary to both the Montgomery County master plan and the design of the streets. Most of the streets are narrow with steep inclines and make visibility a concern. And like all streets in VMAs, the streets are heavily parked. Thornapple and Summit have no sidewalk, which obviously increases the danger for pedestrians. Next slide, please. Similar to Brookville Road, these streets are used by VMA residents throughout the village. Next slide, please. I just want to take a minute to review the most recent traffic data from traffic engineer Joe Kutro. According to the data, Cummings Lane carries the highest traffic volume, and consistent with that volume, Cummings Lane residents expressed the most concern about traffic speeds and volume on the walkability survey. In terms of volume, Shepherd runs a close second to Cummings, with an even higher percentage of cars exceeding the 20-mile-an-hour speed limit. For Thornapple and Summit, volume and speeds are dependent on the placement of the traffic counter. For example, when the counter is placed on the western segment of Thornapple, closest to Brookville Road, the street records both the highest speeds and percentage of cars exceeding the speed limit of any location within VMA. Summit is similar in that when the counter is placed on the northern side of Summit before Thornapple, both the volume and number of vehicles exceeding the speed limit are higher than when the counter is set further down the street. I think it's worth noting that based on this data, over 400 vehicles each day exceed the speed limit on Cummings, Shepherd, and Thornapple, which I believe is probably higher than the total traffic volumes recorded on other village streets. Next slide, please. According to Chris Jakubiak, even speeds of 20 miles an hour are dangerous. That's particularly frightening. Next slide, please. When you look at the research on traffic speeds as they relate to pedestrian deaths, there's consistent evidence that speeds less than 20 miles an hour are critical to preventing pedestrian deaths. And next slide, please. And further, to prevent injuries. You can see here the risk of being hit by either a car or a truck. The risk of severe injury increases pretty dramatically based on the speeds. Next slide, please. Montgomery County shares this concern about speeds on residential streets and is currently considering a bill to lower the minimum speeds to 15 miles an hour. The current lowest speed is 20 miles an hour, as you might see posted throughout the village. Next slide, please. According to research, neighborhood streets have the highest accident rates. And again, next slide, please. And cut-through traffic travels at higher speeds. I think it's important to point out that most of the neighboring jurisdictions have more effectively addressed cut-through traffic with such measures as do not enter signs at certain times a day, by limiting access to Wisconsin Avenue, and the most expensive option over time, police enforcement. Next slide, please. Before turning it over to Catherine to discuss our recommendations to address these issues, I just want to share the map used by Chris Jakubiak showing how these 4 VMA streets connect to the greater community, making them attractive to cut-through drivers. I think it's fair to say that these maps underrepresent the cut-through drivers, as many of the license plate racing down village streets belong to DC residents. This problem is only forecast to worsen as downtown Bethesda continues to expand. Now over to you, Catherine.
Thanks, Lori. Next slide, please, Niles. Thank you so much, Lori, and good evening. Thanks for the opportunity to serve on the Walkability Committee. And for those who don't know me, my name is Catherine Hampel. I've lived in the village since about 2017. And I'm a mother of 2 young children, both of whom attend Chevy Chase Elementary, now virtually, of course, but we anticipate a return to school beginning March 15th, fingers crossed, for 3rd graders, and then moving beyond after that. Of course, their safety and the safety of all children in our community, as well as all members in our community, is especially important to me. And it's why I volunteered to serve on this committee. I'm also excited to share our findings and specifically some recommendations with you all. And as we've mentioned, one of our core recommendations for phase 1 in the walkability improvement study includes more effective speed humps. As you see on the slide here, some of the benefits of the speed humps include speed reduction of up to 20 to 25% between bumps, a volume reduction of approximately 20%, no reduction in parking, and speed reductions similar to police enforcement, which, as we've spoken already, comes at a significantly reduced cost. Simply put, speed humps do work. They help reduce speed and they improve the safety of our streets for all residents. Currently, what we have in place is not efficient and it's certainly not sufficient. Next slide, please, Niles. As you see here, just some research to back us up. According to the Federal Highway Administration, the effectiveness of speed humps in slowing traffic really cannot be disputed. And next slide, please, Niles. Unlike our neighbors in Chevy Chase Village and the town of Chevy Chase, we do not have a regular police enforcement presence. And as such, speed humps are a cost-effective alternative to regular police enforcement. Next slide, please, Niles. So in general, there's a great deal of research out there, which we've spent lots of time reviewing, that really supports the safety of installing efficient speed humps. One such study states that pediatric deaths and injuries are reduced based on the relative proximity of a speed hump to a child's home. And as a community that houses many families with children and young children, including myself, this is a finding that I feel personally that we spend a critical amount of attention on. Next slide, please. And in general, when we're thinking about speed humps and where to place them for optimum effectiveness, experts tell us that speed humps should be placed approximately 130 feet apart to be most effective. This recommendation comes according to research and recommendations provided by our consultant that we've worked closely with, Chris Jakubiak. And just for point of reference for folks here, at present, many speed humps are spaced more than 350 feet apart on many streets in the Village of Martin's Additions. Next slide, please, Niles. So just a general overview here. Our specific recommendations regarding speed humps are to add 1 to 2 additional speed humps between existing humps on both Cummings Lane and Shepherd, add 1 speed hump on Summit between Thornapple and Leland, and 1 speed hump between existing humps on Summit between Thornapple and Taylor. And we'd also encourage the council to consider additional speed humps on Thornapple, depending on other traffic calming measures and installations that are considered. And of course, I want to also just note that we recommend, of course, that the council work with a civil engineer to determine the specifics of those. Now we'll go ahead and turn it back to Lori.
Thank you, Catherine. Niles, you could move to the next slide, please. As we continue to analyze the typical characteristics of the 4 most dangerous streets in the village, I want to take a couple of seconds to run through some photos of the streets to show their similarities. This is Cummings Lane coming from Rollingwood. Next slide, please. This is Shepherd, also coming from Rollingwood. Next slide, please. This is Thornapple coming from Brookville Road and Section 5. And next slide, please. And this is Summit coming from Leland heading into the village again. To the next slide, please, Niles. Yes, you can see all of those streets have straightaways that really encourage drivers entering VMA to exceed the 20-mile-an-hour speed limits. And that's especially true for cut-through traffic. Next slide, please. To counter these effects, urban planner Chris Jakubiak suggested using some type of diverter or curb extension to slow traffic entering VMA and send a strong message that these are neighborhood streets shared with pedestrians to drivers. The next couple of slides, we can move to the next one, are some simple mock-ups, not to show the actual design, but rather to provide a visual point of reference on how these concepts might translate to VMA streets. A helpful way to think about the curb extension is that of a gateway into our community. You can just go through these. This is Cummings Lane. This is Shepherd. And again, these are just mock-ups. This is Thornapple because there's actually an intersection there. So it's possible to have a curb extension on each side with a crosswalk. And this last one is Summit Avenue. So I'm now going to turn it back over to Peter for our recommendations on village-wide improvements.
Thank you, Lori. Niles, next slide, please. I wanted to talk now about some of the more village-wide improvements that are present throughout the village and that we think are very important to walkability, both to safety, but also to convenience and the pleasure, simple pleasure of walking. The first is just the importance of maintaining the village character. This contributes significantly to the enjoyment that we all take in the village. So that's an important issue. And we found also that it contributes significantly to traffic control. We're going to talk next about the problem of maintaining the pedestrian environment in a variety of ways, from broken sidewalks to a variety of other issues. We're going to talk about upgrading crosswalks at all VMA intersections, especially along Brookville Road, where they're particularly important. And there are a variety of ways to do that. And again, a civil engineer's expertise is required to really do this appropriately. And then finally, we want to talk about painted curbs, mandated no parking zones at intersections and hydrants, and the need for some additional signage. And let's start with the issue of maintaining village character. Lori, please discuss this.
Thank you. One of the topics that came up repeatedly, both in the survey and resident comments, was that residents didn't want any of the recommendations to alter the character of the village. We strongly agree. There have been a number of discussions at walkability meetings about clearing out the right-of-ways. That would not only be contrary to village ordinance, but would also potentially detract from the current village character. I think this sentiment is also reflected in the survey data and residents' resistance to losing village trees and village green spaces. Next slide, please. While trying to achieve the goal of creating safer streets while at the same time maintaining VMA's character, we learned about the Voner approach, which takes into consideration the aesthetics of traffic calming installations to blend them into the natural environment. You could see evidence of that in the curb extensions I showed a few minutes ago. By applying Vonorf principles of design, it becomes a misconception to think that there needs to be a binary choice between making the streets safer and maintaining the visual qualities that so many residents appreciate. In fact, after our January presentation, Catherine and I received so many positive comments about the Vonorf concept that we created an extra slide because so many residents loved it but could not remember how to pronounce the name. Next slide, please. To be clear, Vonorf is not some obscure and expensive concept, but rather it's been used effectively throughout the world, especially in municipalities like ours that are considered urban, suburban. Finally, I'd like to share Chris Jakubiak's comments in respect to including the Vonorf concept as part of our recommendations. To quote Chris, the Vonorf concept is key. Living streets, shared streets, very essential to VMA because the aesthetic and financial cost of building sidewalks, retrofitting otherwise beautiful streets in many areas of the village would be big. Now back to you, Peter.
Okay, thank you, Lori. And now moving from the sublime to the mundane, I'd like to address some of the other issues that we think merit attention throughout the village. First, maintaining the pedestrian environment. This was addressed by many residents in the survey and in other comments that we received from residents, and we agree that it's a critically important issue in improving convenience, the pleasure, and the safety of walking in the village. This maintenance would necessarily include regularly assessing and repairing sidewalks, trimming vegetation that protrudes into the sidewalk space, scheduled tree canopy pruning to allow more light to reach walkways and streets, repainting crosswalks and curbs as needed, enforcing VMA ordinances that mandate snow removal to allow pedestrian access along sidewalks, and fixing drainage and water management issues that occur in several places in the village in the public right-of-way. We'd also like to suggest 2 ways of going about this problem of doing maintenance, and they could easily both be done together. First, have regular annual inspections of the streets focusing on these items, followed by, obviously, by action to correct deficiencies found. And second, to have a simple complaint form on the village website that would allow any resident to fill out a notice to the village council and to the village manager that there's a problem with some area on the street. This would be a very easy way for the management of the village to keep up with the problems that do arise. Niles, next slide, please. The next issue we want to talk about is the problem of crosswalks. We think crosswalks should be upgraded throughout the village to provide more safety to people using the crosswalks and to encourage people to use the crosswalks instead of walking in the streets. While drivers are in theory required to defer to pedestrians wherever they happen to be in the street, it is safest for pedestrians to cross the crosswalks, and we think it's best for pedestrians to make those crosswalks as protective as possible. So we think there are 2 different ways in which the problem of upgrading crosswalks can be approached. First, by conventional crosswalks, but with improved markings and signage and rumble strips as cars approach the crosswalk where that would be appropriate. The other alternative is something a little bit different. Niles, next slide, please. Oh, well, excuse me, but there's a picture of a street that has completely lost its crosswalk. Apparently, when the state did some resurfacing on Brookville Road, the crosswalk was covered and was never restored. That presents a danger to pedestrians. Next slide, please, Niles. So here's an example of raised crosswalks, of a raised crosswalk. As you can see, it's at approximately its sidewalk height and requires approaching cars to be vertically displaced a little bit. We think this is a little bit more protective of pedestrians because, first of all, it's an obstacle that catches the eye of a driver because it necessarily slows down the car as it comes in and forces the driver's attention. Next slide, Niles. So here's an example of a raised crosswalk that theoretically has been placed at Turner Lane in Brookville Road. As you can see, this particular one is on a slight downhill, and so when it rains, water is going to run into this, and the crosswalk can become a bit of a drainage issue, and that is one of the considerations that has to go into the decision to use raised crosswalks as opposed to conventional crosswalks. And let me just say thank you to Lori for that excellent photoshopping job. Next slide, Niles, please. There are some places where we think side crosswalks are completely missing, where they really ought to be. First of all, on Thornapple, there are no crosswalks at all connecting the two sides of Thornapple. This includes the intersection of Thornapple with dead-end Delafield that just goes off one block to the north, but which has no crosswalk, but also has no stop sign. So crossing streets there, crossing Thornapple there, can be a real danger, particularly with the volume and speed of cars that we know traverse Thornapple. So that's one problem. We think at the Summit intersection from Rollingwood, that is where Thornapple intersects with Summit from the west, but then with a slight jog goes off to the east as well. It goes down the hill towards the park. So this is a particularly dangerous intersection in the sense that there's a high volume of cars that go through this intersection, mostly cut through traffic, obviously not completely. And the fact that there's no stop sign there is a real danger to pedestrians. It's also loss of an opportunity. A crosswalk with a stop sign would be an ideal opportunity to slow traffic entering and leaving the village. And finally, I wanted to mention at the corner of Summit and Taylor, there's no crosswalk at all, and there really ought to be. Next slide, Niles. Okay, this slide addresses another issue that presents dangers to pedestrians, and that is that parked cars sometimes park very close to intersections and create a visibility obstacle. This presents a danger to passing cars, obviously, coming around that corner, coming around a corner and finding that there's no room for an approaching car. But it also presents a danger to pedestrians. Next slide, Niles. For example, here, a pedestrian walking along Brookville as they approach Shepherd might not be seen because of the white van blocking a driver's view of the intersection. Painting the curbs might help the driver of the van see the no parking area, though, of course, in some cases, parking in no parking areas is not a problem of lack of visibility, but rather a lack of will. So that would not be a complete solution. Next slide, Niles. Okay, here we raise the issue of signage. It's important to point out that traffic signs should be based on an analysis of the streets by a professional traffic engineer or civil engineer or urban planner, because too many signs can become a distraction to drivers and can cause signs to be ignored altogether. But there are some places where signs really can help, and we think one place where we might consider adding signs is if we follow the proposal to build some curb extensions to slow traffic. It may be that we need signs to slow traffic and to warn traffic as it approaches those curb extensions to protect everybody. We recommend that adding a stop sign at the intersection of Dead End Delafield and Thornapple. We'd like to consider also adding pedestrian warning signs at crosswalks so that drivers are alerted to the possibility that pedestrians may be immediately ahead of them so that they'll slow down, presumably. Next slide, Niles. Oh, and I think Catherine should take over at this point.
Thank you, Peter. So I'll briefly just discuss potential costs of traffic calming measures we're mentioning tonight and recommending here. Just briefly, obviously, there'd be a loss of potential parking spaces. Curb extensions and crosswalks may result in a loss of 1 to 2 parking spaces, but that really is dependent on location. The financial costs, of course, which will be determined based on the council's recommendations and where they proceed to go. And also a possible minimal increase in Montgomery County fire and rescue emergency response time. This was something that we had many discussions about. And we just want to note that our full report offers more detailed and specific data regarding this point, and that can be found on the Walkability page on the Village of Martin's Editions website. Next slide, please, Niles. And this slide really just tries to outline what we see as the anticipated benefits and really offsets of traffic calming in our village. One of the main things, of course, is the reduction of traffic volume of up to 20%. Excuse me. Speed reductions of between 20 and 25%. Of course, reduced pollution and noise, hopefully, and safer streets for both pedestrians and bicyclists. We have many bicyclists in this village, as well as walkers. It also preserves the village aesthetics, and Lori spoke to you about the Boner piece, which we received a lot of positive response about, which then ultimately increases our property values, we hope. And finally, it's much more cost effective compared with a regular police enforcement. I'm going to turn it back over to Lori now, given time constraints, who's going to give us a good walkthrough and overview of the Montgomery County Vision Zero initiative. Lori?
Yes, thank you, Catherine. Over recent years, pedestrian safety issues have gained greater attention around the country, and more specifically here in Montgomery County. A couple of years ago, the county launched its version of the forward-looking Vision Zero initiative, which is a program designed to make county streets safer through redesign. An offshoot of the Vision Zero program is the county's Master Bicycle Plan, which is designed to increase cyclist safety and encourage more residents to avoid using their cars and travel by bicycle instead. The plan sets out to accomplish these goals by turning neighborhood streets into greenways, similar to what we've recommended. Interestingly, the Master Bicycle Plan cuts right through Martin's Edition on Cummings Lane and parts of Shepherd, which I think provides further evidence that these streets were never designed nor intended to carry the current high volumes of cut-through traffic. Next slide, Niles, please. Thank you. Again, our recommendations, particularly the curb extensions and the application of some of the Boner principles to our street design, dovetail nicely with the county plan to redesign their streets to make them safer for pedestrians. In contrast, in previous years, the county focused on police enforcement, which is more expensive, and there were also social equity issues associated with police enforcement. The county's shared street program, where traffic is limited on streets, is a good example of how the county is instituting these changes. We provide a lot of additional information about these programs in our full report, which, thanks to Niles, is now posted on the village website as of a couple of hours ago. Now I'll turn it back to Peter to summarize our task force recommendations.
Next slide, Niles, please. Okay, I just want to go through the recommendations that we're making, summarize them, and and then ask for your thoughts and responses. First, Cummings, Shepherd, Thornapple, and Summit were not designed to function as cut-through streets, carrying traffic from outside the village to points outside the village, or to accommodate the current traffic volumes and speeds. We recommended creating neighborhood greenways by installing traffic calming features such as speed humps at a distance of 130 feet apart and curb extensions at village entrances from Rollingwood, Section 5, and sometimes from Brookville Road. We suggest using Vonorf design principles, which urban planners are very fond of these days, wherever possible, to blend traffic calming installations and maintain the character of the village. And we want to maintain the pedestrian environment by regularly and with a sense of commitment, repairing sidewalks, trimming vegetation, and addressing the whole raft maintenance issues that are present in the village. Niles, next slide, please. We want to enforce VMA ordinance to mandate snow removal from sidewalks, to upgrade crosswalks at all Brookville Road intersections, and indeed throughout VMA as appropriate, as we discussed earlier. Painting curbs to discourage illegal parking at intersections and hydrants, improving pedestrian signage, installing a stop sign at the corner intersection of Dead End Delafield and Thornapple. We'd also like to suggest creating a prototype street to test the effectiveness of the traffic calming installations, and so the community can get a sense of how they like these ideas. And finally, we'd like to strongly urge a phase 2 walkability study with a focus on Brookville Road, sidewalks, pedestrian safety, and some of the streets that we were not able to address in our study because of insufficient data in the fact that we relied strongly on data and in our efforts. So that's our list. Thank you for your attention. We hope you find these recommendations worthwhile. I do want to share the gratitude that Lori and Catherine expressed to Niles, first and foremost, for a million things that he's done throughout this whole project, to Arthur for his sage advice on numerous occasions, and to the council for its foresightedness in pursuing the issue of safety and redesign over parts of the village. So thank you very much, and we look forward to talking about this more.
Thank you. And as the council liaison with the committee, I just wanted to add that one of the points I kept making at the very beginning is that they had to base their recommendations not on what seemed good or what a great idea that they just had while walking down the street today, but on solid research. And it turns out they found it by the bucketful. We're not the first people to run into these problems, and so there has been tremendous amount of research that they've uncovered throughout this part of the country, around the country, and around the world. So I want to thank them for a very thorough research-based, fact-based report. So the things that they are recommending are very solidly based, and they're just not something that they came up with while walking down the street this morning. They're based on very solid amount of research, and I thank them all.
Right, and there are recommendations that can actually be implemented. I just think it's a really impressive report, and I want to thank you all for all of your hundreds of hours. I'm sure that's an underestimation of research and writing and compiling slides, but it's a really impressive report, and obviously it's going to take us some time to digest it all, but it's a great deliverable.
I think from the very beginning, right after we got the first survey results, and we saw that the sidewalks, the physical state of the sidewalk was a major issue, we didn't have to wait for a final report to start doing something about it. And I think some of the suggestions you're making right now, we can begin doing immediately. The assessments, the regular assessments, the regular repair, the cleaning of the foliage and other impediments can be done right from yesterday. In fact, it did start yesterday or a few weeks ago with the repair. So thank you, and we can start moving on some of these things immediately.
Thank you very much.
And Ron has confirmed that things that are simply maintenance and not significant, Niles will just do as routine repairs.
Great.
Can I throw in one 30-second comment? This is Holly. I know I'm out of order. Could I just throw in one about how much I love this? But I have one thing to think about when you proceed. Am I allowed to do that, or is that bad?
Well, it is out of order. I mean, I think we can definitely take that. I love this. I think that's a great way to do it.
I just want you to be sure you think about the one thing is go down Leland Street off Bradley, and you really just need to be careful how the Verwolf, I don't know how you pronounce it, thing gets built so that it doesn't look commercial and we don't lose the village character. I think all these things, I think this is a fabulous report. Just want to show you some parts of town where it doesn't look good and we need to make sure it looks good. You know what I mean?
Where was
Yes,
that? Holly?
I've seen that. I know where that is.
Yeah.
Yes.
Where did you suggest, Holly? You said on Bradley.
Leland, well, it's Hillendale, but it's the beginning of Leland, right? If you go down Bradley, right near CVS, if you turn right on Leland to go up toward Bethesda Avenue, it's been done there, and it's not well done. And there are ways to do it beautifully, and there are ways to do it where it makes the place look like a parking lot. Like one of your pictures had cement round planters. Those look very commercial. But there are other ways to do that, what you're talking about. I mean, this is all fabulous suggestions that don't look commercial. And we just need to be really careful that we don't do the ones that look commercial. I can show you. Yeah.
We tend to like the ones that aren't ugly.
Ugly's in the eye of the beholder. That's the trouble.
I think one of the important parts of their recommendations is to have a prototype street where we have the opportunity to try things out. Knowing to begin with, you're not going to get it right the first time. So starting something, putting it in, having the ability to move it around, change the dimensions until you get it right, I think is a very important suggestion. So thank you.
Hi, this is Jeff here. I just wanted to, a very quick comment. First of all, again, what everyone said, really just fabulous work and kudos to everybody. And just a couple thoughts, which I can follow up with Arthur and others in due course in terms of perhaps the next phase. But when I see this, you know, something that really, as someone with a business and public health, you know, professional background, I kind of want to see, you know, like a table that costs out, these are the options and costs, but also, you know, benefits, so we can just really see and then perhaps prioritize that, because I think that would be very helpful. Right. The other piece I just want to put out, and I just want to recognize to the entire committee, residents, everybody, is obviously safety was a piece of this. And I know we'll hear later from Mark about the safety committee. But again, just recognizing that perhaps what priorities might have been 5, 10 years ago, things change. So whether it's pandemic or things that we understand about our walkability, that safety is something that perhaps we do need to take up. So I just want to, you know, the kudos. And the final piece, again, this is just a real in the weeds example. And again, I commend the idea, you know, when it snows, that the suggestion that we should clear, but also recognizing that we have, you know, a subset of residents that for whatever reason might not be able to do that. And that's why I think we could work with Arthur, you know, reserves and, you know, are there folks that may need that support? Because if we do mandate something, we want to make sure that those, you know, everyone is able to follow through on that sort of a mandate. With that said, again, thank you so much and look forward to working with you all on this. I think it's amazing.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have additional council comments?
I'd just like to echo what everybody else said. It's not just that it's comprehensive, but it's thoughtful, you know, and that's my reaction to it. And there is a tremendous amount here to digest, all good. And so I, you know, love some time to process it myself. And I'm with Susan. Hey, the no-brainer stuff, the maintenance stuff, Niles, just go for it, you know. But thank you.
Todd, I think one of the points of doing a prototype, and this goes to Jeff's point, is to look at the costs. One of the reasons they did not have costs is that, you know, it would take a whole engineering study to have come up with that. But actually going out and getting contractors in and saying, how much do the speed bumps cost? How much do these raised humps cost? The walkway gives us an idea of what to think of going into the future. So by actually doing it and doing it small to begin with, you begin to get an idea of not only how to do it, but how much it might cost and where you would then go from there. So.
Amen.
Okay, so I guess we need to have someone make a motion for us to accept this report, and then we will study it.
Okay. I will make that motion. Thank you so much for putting this report together. I actually absolutely loved seeing the village streets, so the Photoshop job was amazing. Thank you. Visualize it.
You have no idea how many hours Lori's been slaving over those photographs.
Well,
I second that, so let's move forward. Let's go do it.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Oh, another unanimous vote. This is awesome. Good work.
Great.
Thank you all. This was great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, so next we have a discussion and possible adoption of the scope of work of a potential safety committee or task force. Who wants to start the discussion?
I'll start that off. Having written a task force mission with the help of many of my friends and colleagues and residents, I didn't take all your suggestions, but I took, I'd say 92%, which is pretty good. I think there's two main points to this setting up the task force. One is that there is a certain vague sense among residents that things aren't quite right, either in safety and health. And I take Tiffany's point that health is not a function that we have done, we face or deal with in the village, but it's not necessarily something that a group could not deal with. But at the same time, we don't really know the dimensions of it. So I think that the main point of the task force is to figure out what's the problem. Is there a there? What are the issues? And so a good part of their mission statement is to go out and look for the information on safety, on the issues, on the health issues. And the second part is to come up with some recommendations. And at first, I deliberated about putting in specific kinds of recommendations. And everyone said, go with it, put in these are examples. And what I wanted to do with this is to open up people's minds, not to close them, that these are the only possibilities to review and consider, but these are among the kinds of things you might consider. And to broaden the idea of here are different ways to deal with the problems, the issues that you might find in doing your research. And so the whole point of this is fact-finding, assessing what's doable and what kind of a format, what kind of a group. So I think I listed about 4 or 5 potential schemes of things that might be done at the end. I hope this doesn't confine people's imaginations, but only stimulates them to think of what else. So with that said, I suggest that we entertain any discussion of this and move forward to set up a committee.
Well, I'll start. I think a task force is doable. As you pretty much outlined, a 6-month duration task force might be a good way to test the waters. Just a thought.
Any other council member ideas, recommendations, revisions? Todd, you're mute, Todd. I see your mouth moving, but I don't hear nothing.
Of course, I've never been on Zoom before. So,
okay.
I think that the work that's been done leading up to this, Mark and Jeff and your contributions, Arthur, and the rest of your committee, I think there's a lot of thoughtfulness that's gone behind this, and I think overall it's worth looking at. And I like the task force idea. Let's see how it works, and then make a decision with the report whether we move forward full blown. And I think the only question I had, and this goes to a conversation we had at the last meeting, and Mark and I touched base a little bit on this, was just ensuring that there were guardrails on this. And there's only one place that I just can't, maybe I don't understand the language, where it says work and under operations in letter A, where it says work with the village's contracted police officers to identify information sources and recommend procedures. I'm not clear as to what that means.
Yeah, what that was intended for, and actually I think Tiffany suggested that language. Out of all the people who suggested things, I kind of lost track. But what that means is that the precincts have very extensive and historic amount of data on the kinds of crime patterns and vandalisms and other things that they have accumulated over time. So it essentially says, work with the police, find out where that information is, and use that in your deliberations. That's kind of what that's getting at. Use what's out, find out what's out there, find out what has already been collected, and use it.
No, and I think that finding out what's out there is not bad by any means. I mean, it's the recommend procedures part. Are we asking this task force to make suggestions to the police for how they go?
No, not make suggestions to the police. It's getting suggestions from the police.
Mm-hmm. So can we just clarify? It would help me feel better if we just clarify the recommend procedures. They're not recommending to the police what they do. You know, just something just to.
Okay.
That part of it will make me feel better about it.
Okay.
Does that register with others on that? Because I think any recommendations or findings ultimately get reported to the council, and it should be the council that,
right,
gives guidance to the police, rather than having the task force do that on behalf of the council.
No, I think the idea was that the police that we have contracted are way overqualified for walking the beat, and have a tremendous amount of background and knowledge on many of these issues. So it's looking to them for information that they could then use.
No. I'm with you on that. Yeah. I'm totally with you on that. It's just which direction is it going in?
Right. Okay. I'm looking at the wording to see how to change that.
What if you changed recommend to recommended?
Information sources and recommended procedures. Good. 2 letters. You did it, Ron.
Was that? I'm curious if I can ask Mark. You raised your hand. Was that what you intended, or?
Oh, okay. As I said back in December, a long time ago, when I didn't present this as well as we've done now, we don't represent Martin's Addition. We're not elected officials. We're not given a charter to do anything but collect the data, curate the data, and present the data in whole with our comments. You will, and to the extent that some of the recommendations are recommendations that families could follow on their own, the data will all be presented so people can make their own decisions. We're not government. We're just advising you.
Yeah. Okay.
We can't ask anybody who provides services for you to do anything.
Gotcha. Thanks. Right. I appreciate that clarification. So I think that the ED, after recommend information to identify information sources and recommended procedures, helps clarify that in my mind.
Right.
So
good.
I'm good with that.
Good idea, Ron. Thank you.
The only thing I'll add is really it's thank you to everybody. I think this is a really wonderful example of council and residents coming together. And Arthur, you said it really so beautifully at the beginning of just this sense within the community of whatever it is, that there's a desire to kind of look at it, understand it better. And I think we all agree that a task force is the perfect venue, because we know there may be something there. The real question is, once we get past COVID, and we will get past COVID, then when we come back and readdress this, do you still need this, or did we address things? I think this will all come out, and I think it's a wonderful mechanism. And I just want to thank residents, Mark, everybody, and the council members for keeping an open mind. So,
and so when we adopt, I presume we will adopt this tonight. The next step will be to ask for volunteers to serve on the task force. And I would suggest that people send in a one-page description of why they want to do it and any particular background that they have that would add to the resources of the task force. So, Susan, shall we move forward with that? Anyone
Yeah, if we're
else?
done, if we're done discussing it, yes.
Good. I'm done.
Would someone like to make a motion regarding adoption of?
I will move that we
task
adopt this mission statement and adopt the plan to assemble a task force.
A second.
Okay.
Aye. Arthur? Aye. Okay. So I guess Jeff was the second.
I seconded it.
Okay. So all in, I think it was unanimous.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Good. All right. So next is the discussion of potential changes to the tree ordinance.
Okay, it looks like I'm up again. I simplified the ordinance that I had proposed earlier to make it almost fully compatible with the county. I took out the requirement of replacing a tree that's taken down. I'm sorry. I mean, we have construction going on next door to us, and a number of trees were taken down in exactly the way that was described earlier. They didn't have to come down to allow the floor plan to be put in. But this raises questions that on the old tree committee, I see Paula here, we came up against, is that this requires a whole bureaucracy to deal with taking down trees. Is it dangerous? How do you know? How you need to get an inspection. You need to have some kind of a hearing. And it turned out that in neighboring jurisdictions, when they did that, they didn't save all that many trees by going through this process. So what this does is makes it compatible with the county. I just approved a bill today to our arborist for putting in 9 village trees, and it costs about, on the average, about $550 a tree to put in. So we are requiring $750 fee.
Doing over there on that Martin's
Sorry, I muted that.
Okay.
Continue.
So it costs about $550 to put in a village tree. So this fee that we're asking for would cover a little bit more than the cost of one village tree. And I think it's a reasonable request to make of people who require a sediment control permit, which is only gained when you're moving a sizable amount of earth, 10 cubic feet, which in a way, one way to think of it is 30 by 30 by 10 feet, or by 1 foot high. So this isn't, adding a porch onto your backyard, onto the back of the house. So one other change I made was to decrease the size of the tree from 3 inches to 2 inches, which I was told by our arborist is not only is cheaper, but also grows faster, and to say you have time to do it. Our tree supervisor, Monty Bolin, had noted that a number of developers put in trees, so that's fine. So if you put in a tree within 6 months, you don't have to pay the fee, so you give you time to do it. So it's simplified, it's consistent with the county, and I think it does the job of both encouraging planting as well as replacing our tree money.
Has this revised proposal been reviewed by Ron?
Not formally, I don't think.
I read it in preparation for tonight's meeting.
Okay. So you committed it to memory.
Well, it's not that long.
So it's not that long, and a lot of it is deleted.
and most of it I copied directly from the county.
Yes, that's correct.
And so there wouldn't be any county conflicts?
No. And as Arthur noted in the memo, some years ago, the county adopted what's sometimes referred to as the shade tree law, which, as Arthur notes, provides that if you're disturbing 5,000 square feet or more, such that you need a sediment control permit, you've got to plant 3 trees. They've got to be given 800 square feet each to grow. And if you don't have that much available room, then you pay this money into a fund. And the county uses that money to plant a tree anywhere the county wants in the county. So the village exempted itself from that law because, among other reasons, didn't find it fair to collect money from residents and then use the money to plant trees elsewhere. So yeah, this would be consistent with the county approach. I mean, the The one comment I might make is this shows selected from an approved list of desirable trees now stricken. You know, I might suggest you keep that in because you would want canopy trees to be installed, and the arborist could recommend a list of canopy trees that will actually give you the maximum environmental benefits, you know, rather than someone putting in a weeping cherry, for example.
I think I say in there a canopy tree, but I didn't. I took out the definition, but yeah, that's fine. I was of two minds about that. Good.
Okay. Do we have any additional discussion? No? Nobody?
So I would like to put this, to have this drawn up as an ordinance for consideration at future meeting. If nobody objects to that. Or so move, I don't know, does this have to be?
Make a motion, yeah.
Make a motion to, I would move to do that.
Second?
Do we have any seconds?
I'd be okay with doing a little more, reviewing it a little more, but I mean, I think there was a lot of opposition initially.
There was some, there was also a lot of
some support, yes,
as well.
Roughly equal amounts, which is kind of standard.
I think much of the opposition has been dealt with. That by taking out the removal, giving a property owner time to do it, reducing the size and so on, has dealt with many of the points of opposition.
And also moving it forward does not preclude further discussion and amendments. So I will second Arthur's motion to proceed with this ordinance.
Okay, all in favor?
Me.
Right, okay, so I think that's everyone.
I'm just going to, and I'll make this short, you know, the only reason why I'm going to abstain from this is really so I can be consistent in, you know, I don't seem like I'm differing from one ordinance to another, and that I agree with you. I think, Arthur, you've done an incredible and a masterful job of bringing in all the different opinions. And the only thing is, I do feel we haven't had like a formal forum to discuss it. And like I said, this is more of a consistency thing. I think before drafting, I encourage having that so that we can be ensured that we do have those opinions. But, you know, for content-wise, I feel comfortable, but I'm just going to abstain because I just feel that I want to be consistent in my positions. So,
okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay.
So that means we will be looking forward to an ordinance, Ron, next meeting. Thank you.
Okay, so then discussion of the ordinance process, Arthur.
Okay, here we go again. This is in response to, I thought, some very good ideas that came out of various residents' comments at our open meetings and during the council meetings, that we explain better why we're doing things. It always seemed obvious to us sitting there, but we never really took the pains to go out and write up an explanation. And so Todd did such a good job of that. It was such a good example for the other committee meetings that we've had, or committees, that I said, let's formalize it. And so this is a policy proposal that we accompany by an explanation the need for any ordinances. Now, the one question that has been raised, I say, including arguments for and against. And what I'm thinking of here is that in many states, the state a legislative analyst, something like the Congressional Budget Office, who is a nonpartisan job, does that. They review proposals to legislation and come up with arguments for and against it. Or if you go to the League of Women Voters and want to know what about that proposition that Montgomery County has on the ballot, they give you arguments for and against. And since the League of Women Voters are not going to be looking at Martin's Addition's tree ordinances or such, I thought it might be a useful thing for who's ever proposing it to come up with some arguments against it. But I'm open to the discussion about whether that should be included or not. For roundness, I think it is, but on the other hand, if you're proposing something, maybe you're not the best person to come up with all the good arguments against doing it. Leave that up to somebody else. So I'm of two minds about that and willing to take anybody's good advice.
I would definitely suggest that if you feel strongly enough about a proposed ordinance, you should be able to just advance your own arguments. But trust me, somebody will come up with counter arguments.
Okay, that's a good idea. We have to count on residents then for doing
Oh, they will.
their
Don't
job.
worry. They will not disappoint.
Okay. Okay, strike out that phrase.
Arthur, I just want to, I'll make this short, relatively short, because I know that we still have things on the agenda and time is precious. Again, I just want to commend you for having sort of the pulse on the community and recognizing that there's a feeling of wanting to have something like this out there that just recognizes, you know, places that have been brought up of how we can improve the process. So I want to show you something not as trying to say we shouldn't move forward. In fact, I greatly encourage this because I think it really moves the dial in the right direction. But I'm just going to flash something really quick, and I hope it's actually something, quite frankly, I can work with you on to just discuss. And so I'm flashing this, and I also want you to recognize, oh, I guess I have to turn off the back. I promise this will be very short, so don't be fearful, but I have to take off my virtual background so you can actually see me. Okay. You know, I looked at this, and this is like a little bit of a process map, right? Where kind of looking at the kind of sequence of how many meetings, and I want to also, you know, recognize Ron, you're incredible because, you know, with just how you've outlined things in terms of those ways that we go about things. And then I did like a little time scale of, you know, anywhere from 3 to sort of 8 months sort of thing. And I'm not going to go through this, but the reason why I'm showing this is I think process and time matter a lot in terms of efficiency. Because at the bottom here, you know, this little orange thing, and I did this after doing a card with my daughter as part of a kindness club, so I had her markers in front of me. So I appreciate your, you know, willingness, and here's the card just so you can appreciate, you know, I went from this to this. But very quickly, you know, just on a more serious and practical note, is I put this out here because, you know, up here, when I look at how we've done some of the ordinances, like we just talked about this idea of, you know, initial discussion and then kind of drafting the ordinance. And then down the road, we've had resident comments. And at times, I think the residents have felt, you know, I wish we were able to input a bit earlier in the process to recognize not only the current draft, but perhaps other research and other non-legislative options. So I'm going to end here because I promise not to gab. So, you know, I put these question marks, and one of them is, you know, in the policy that you're putting forth, I think it's wonderful, but I also think that sequence and timing matter. And so that if we had a little bit of a time scale that was sort of when something is initially discussed, we had an opportunity, I think, for residents through a forum or something like that to talk about it. You know, maybe there is some additional research or options about what's being done in neighboring communities and just a thoughtful kind of process. I really believe a lot of the air pressure would be let out of the tires, because then not only perhaps does this get streamlined, you know, and you reduce the amount of time it takes to move something forward where we're all in it together, but the most important thing is this box, which is probably illegible, is the number of community hours, legislative attorney hours, council hours of going back and forth on things that, quite frankly, if we discussed up front, we wouldn't have as much of a yo-yo down here. So I'm going to pause there and simply say again, Arthur, I think what you've done is fabulous. Again, you've read the minds and the tone and the pulse of the community. And I'm just putting out there, I think I'd welcome the idea of discussing it a little further, because I think we can tweak it a little bit. And by doing so, we can really optimize create efficiency, and reduce the amount of time required to move something through that is mission critical to our community. Thanks. Over.
Okay, Arthur, again, this time for financial matters.
Oh,
this will be more fun for you.
More fun. Okay, financial matters, we're doing okay. But we do have, we're right on, it's kind of, everything averages out after 6 months. So for a while, we weren't getting any money. Now we're getting the money. Spending is going on, so everything is very smoothly done. But there are a few categories where we have to make some budget resolutions to increase the amount of spending. And that's in the report, and they're information technology, where we are spending more than we had originally contemplated as we are following recommendations of our cybersecurity study that we had done. But also, we have moved from a computer system that was essentially a home system that you took in your laptop that you used at home. We used it in the office. Now we're in a full office framework, which is a different kind of a framework. We're backing up to the web. We have various kinds of security things that are in the system, and we have a consultant who helps us with all of this. So information technology was running more than we thought a year or so ago when we did this. Also, as noted earlier, our building review and permits. Everybody is out there building and expanding, and so that's taken more work. And Ron has used up some of his time and in the ethics committee and other ventures. And the tree planting, we got many more than we thought we were going to. As I said, about $500 to $600 a tree, and it adds up. So these are the places where we're going to need money, but we're also have been saving money. And so as a whole, we are not going to be increasing our spending at all. So what we need are resolutions to change these budget categories, and would welcome any questions from any of the council members on these things.
Right. Well, I would just like to clarify first thing. Ron has been very busy with things like requests from residents for a number of different items, as well as a lot of different topics this last fiscal year. So we've had a lot of legal issues that are unlike others we've encountered. And he's provided great advice. So at this point, sorry?
No, go ahead, sorry.
I was just going to say, would anybody like to make a motion to amend the budget?
I had a question, and real quickly, Arthur, thank you again for preparing this. It was so easy to understand, and I really appreciate it. And I had really a couple real quick questions. So first, I was curious, and again, if this isn't germane, we can take it offline, but in terms of the reserves, I looked at, I did a quick calculation, and it looked like we had about 131% in terms of reserve to budget. And I'm just curious, do we have an earmark that is mandatory in terms of the amount of reserves that we keep?
No, we have some reserves set aside for capital expenditures, roads, sidewalks, that sort of thing. But about a year or two ago, our auditors suggested that we come up with a designated reserve that would at least cover a year's budget. And back in 2010, in the last recession, we were really hit. Our revenues dropped by about 50%, and we had to dip into the reserves. We increased the taxes, we dipped into the reserves, and that rainy day fund came in useful. But that's all. It's just a recommendation. There's nothing legal about it, and it does provide some backup for us.
No, and I say in a very positive way, just like our auditor did. I mean, it's incredible that to be not only in the black on this, but by this amount it should make everyone feel good. But also, if there was any real critical issue, that there are some funds there that we perhaps could tap into. And Susan already covered well the legal expenses, and Ron. And then the other piece, just out of curiosity, it seemed there is a big, over 50% drop in the accounting expenses.
Yes,
what was
that's
that due
one
to?
of our major moves.
Yeah, I was like...
we fired our accountant
Ah.
and gave our manager a new job.
Ah.
So technology has allowed us to do that. The manager before used to handle everything. He just never entered data into the books. Now with QuickBooks and things in the cloud, and he's able to do, and I think,
yeah.
now you can tell me,
so I can
in roughly the same amount of time that he handled things before, he's doing the bookkeeping.
Right. So I'm doing more of the second level of bookkeeping. So before, what was happening is we had a kind of an inefficient process where I or the manager would do work, and then it would be sent to the accountant, and then he would sort of say, yes, you did it correctly, and then it would be entered, right? So we had this extra step. So what we do now is we still have an accountant, right, who does less work, whose main job is reconciling the bank statements at the end of each month to make sure to be a check on what we're doing and to help us prepare for the audit. But the day-to-day bookkeeping is done by me. So we've sort of reconfigured what we're doing, and that has allowed us to bring costs down tremendously on our accounting side of things and still be as efficient. And you know, I speak monthly with our accountant, so it still has that check. It's just reallocating tasks.
And the other thing that this did, we improved the checks and balances in the system. This was part of our accounting audit review that we did last year. So the checks and balances are better. We have better oversight into our spending. We realized that there was a lot of spending that the council had no approval over, that we're just slipping through, and so we've changed that. So spending less money and doing a better job at it.
Having more fun.
Well, that's awesome. And my only comment, and I'm sure either Ron or Susan will tell me if I'm in trouble for saying this, but I think there's certainly grounds here perhaps to look at, a bonus in terms of what you've saved us. So I will definitely be behind that for you, Niles, for next year.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
So we need a motion. Do we have a motion to approve the budget resolution? Somebody move?
I move.
I move. Aye. We'll flip for it. How's that?
Okay. Aye.
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 Thank you. I think I'm done for tonight.
Okay, so next we have Niles's report.
Right. So, obviously we were just touching on the day-to-day, the regular stuff that we're doing with the budget and things like that. We're also doing things, the office is doing things related to, we provide support for the Walkability Task Force, as you also heard of, and doing, general office infrastructure. We're working on the election stuff related to, doing a vote-by-mail election. We're going to issue soon an RFP to conduct the all-mail election. This is related to just finding, going through an RFP process just to see it. The amount of cost for an election is less than what is required to do an RFP for the village, but given the importance of this and doing it this way, we thought would be a good way of getting more to see what is out there for the market, and sort of doing it that way. So we're going to finalize that and send that out very, very soon. We're also beginning the work on the voter roll and things like that, getting in touch with new residents, seeing who needs who are no longer in the village, that kind of thing, making it as accurate as possible. And as we talked about before, there's information that will be coming out in the wrap-ups and in the newsletter, all about the election dates and all of those kind of things. Waste and recycling changes. This came up last month. There was questions around potentially changing, such as increasing the frequency of recycling and bulk trash services. So I reached out to Waste Management, and because this is another thing that will be governed by RFP, we had to sort of decide how best to ask this question. What they told me is that increasing our recycling accounts for about 20% of our bill with Waste Management. So if we increase the number of recycling days, say from 1 to 2, we're looking at potentially about a 20% increase in what we spend on waste management. They didn't give me a bulk trash calculation because that's a little bit trickier. It's once a month. There's how they bill it is a little bit more complicated, but I would suspect that increasing that would also potentially say maybe a 10 to 15% increase as well. So there's some increase that would go in making those changes. At the same time, as I said, this contract expires in June. We're working already on getting RFP or invitation to bid together, and we'll send that out fairly soon as well to try to give us as much time and as much data as possible before, so that the council can make any changes there. One thing to note, there was also talk, I know, of potentially reducing the trash service as a way of offsetting costs. Under the code, we're required to do two trash pickups. So any change to trash service would also require a change in the code. So I want to keep that clear. Also, the snow removal, I want to thank everybody. You know, it's gone pretty smoothly. Obviously, we've had a few different days. Just keeping the streets clear at times. You know, we've put up some of the snow emergency signs for no parking. People have been responding to that quite well. And I think it's gone pretty well, and a few residents have said so as well. And then lastly, in addition to the other talked about RFPs and other issues, we are also going to be issuing a RFP for the street maintenance. This is something that we needed to do anyways. It's sort of a routine update to that. And so if there are any other improvements that need to be made related to walkability or other things, that could also be a part of that RFP process as well. So just putting that on the table for the council. And those are my main updates there.
Okay, so also on the subject of village management, at our last meeting, staff had evaluated a couple of different arborist bids and determined that two of them were roughly equivalent. Based on the individual conversations I had with each council member, it appears it is a fact that Mulherron would be the majority choice. And so I wonder if anyone would like to make a motion to have Niles draft a contract.
Is that correct? Did everyone like Mulherron? I got you nodding your head.
So we're gonna, yeah, I was just saying make a motion and we could vote. So
I want to hear any people's discussions.
Well, as you know, we had to have a private, a closed discussion to discuss certain issues, and we typically don't air these in, Ron, guide me here, in open meetings.
Yeah,
regarding
the council had a closed session to discuss personnel matters related to performance and the like, and to preserve the confidentiality of that discussion, a closed session was held on that respect.
Okay.
But you're free to discuss non-confidential aspects of the contracting in the open meeting.
Well, I don't mind saying what, talk about my thoughts on that, which was that the trees, our canopy, and the like are, as we've been saying for lots of council meetings, that's a really important part of this village. And I like the idea of having a company with lots of resources that can help us maintain those trees rather than relying on a single individual. And that's really what was behind my decision to go with Mulherron.
I think the only thing I would add is, in my discussion on this, I brought to the table the costs of during COVID of looking at the different options and perhaps making a switch, and what does that mean during a pandemic versus not a pandemic, and would that have any impact in particular on this decision? And that was the only issue that I brought up as part of this deliberation. Thanks.
So do we have a motion to direct, or I guess, to have Niles draft the contract?
I'll make a motion and Niles draft a contract with the elected.
I will second it.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
So, okay.
Against?
Is it, Susan, so you asked opposed as well?
Oh, yeah, opposed. I thought I did because I saw the hands, but okay. Okay, so the ayes have it. And Niles will do what he's told. Okay, thanks, Niles. Okay, so.
So just for the record, so Arthur and Jeff opposed, was that what it was?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Okay. Opportunity to hear resident comments. Okay, Larry?
First, I'd like to thank Jeff. So you might be young enough not to remember this, but I liked your Ross Perot presentation. So us older folks would. Anyway, point is, though, the concept is absolutely right on. That is a brilliant suggestion that we use that's a good way to process the thing. And with that in mind, I thought about some of the issues that came up during the Walkability Task Force. And it is an issue of there's some coordination or communication problems between what happens, for example, with different committees, like how do safety, tree, and walkability task force overlap? And how do they keep, when they do overlap, how can they inform each other of that? Obviously, one of the issues is like with the trees, you know, and in the Walkability Task Force, I pointed out that we have tree contractors planting trees 1 foot off the curb, which means all kinds of problems, and it's just the wrong way to do it. What do we do about that? Okay, how does that affect a lot of other things in the long run? And the other issue is, how do we get these task force, while they're functioning, the communication with the council? Another example being, during the task force meetings, a resident installed a 3.5 foot in diameter boulder at a corner right at the curb. And nobody, and I've reported it, and nobody has taken any steps to deal with that. And you can find that at Chestnut and Thornapple. And I find that kind of amazing. So the task force, you know, sometimes we take actions like the tree committee actions. How does that affect the walkability actions? Well, it does a lot. Okay. So
okay. Thanks, Larry.
The other issue I wanted to point out is I want to thank my fellow members of the task force for their hard work. But I did want to point out three things. One, the concept of slowing speed down, the speed calming or traffic calming ideas. I went to the Maryland Department of Transportation, their site, and I found something that was sort of surprising. It says that speed limits are set for ideal conditions. So if we set 20 miles an hour, that's in ideal circumstances. Literally, the law says motorists must adjust their speed according to the existing traffic, pedestrian activity, road surface, lighting, and weather conditions. And they must reduce their speed and drive at a reasonable and prudent speed with regard to those dangers and considerations. Okay, that's fair enough. What would you do if someone said, oh, I'm sorry, I was speeding and struck someone and hurt them. I didn't know there were adverse conditions. Well, Lori pointed out Vision Zero, and Vision Zero's explanation of what to do is education. And one of those educations, for example, is to inform people about it. And so, you know, we were talking about low-cost things, and there's nothing stops us from easily right now starting to implement installing yield to pedestrians and yield to bicyclists on those streets. Finally, as to that education process, the Bethesda Magazine article that wrote an in-depth thing about accidents in Montgomery County reported that all of the deaths, pedestrian deaths, occurred in crosswalks and on streets that had sidewalks. So the assumptions of what they can do or not do is kind of interesting. But what was very specific to Martin's additions was the fact that in Maryland, by law, every intersection has crosswalks. So in the presentation where it tells you we need to install crosswalks, that's not true. They exist by law now. What we need to do is maybe paint them or mark them as an educational process to remind everybody that they are there. But they exist, and you have to yield regardless of whether the crosswalk is painted. They're present there now. The other issue is...
That's not the point. I think the point is that that's not...
Wait a minute. Please don't interrupt me. Please don't interrupt me. You can say
Larry, we have a 2-minute limit.
I'm almost done. I got 2 more sentences. Okay?
2 more sentences and 5 more minutes. Okay, go ahead.
Thanks, Susan.
You're welcome. Go ahead.
You don't need to say that.
Come on.
So, for example, the other thing is that because there are no traffic lights in Martin's additions, a pedestrian can cross the street anywhere they want. They do not have to cross in the crosswalks. And that's why we need to have yield to pedestrian signs warning drivers that that is the case. And that those pedestrians have a right to be in that street, even if they're not in the crosswalks. How many people here actually knew that fact?
All right, thank you, Larry.
Okay.
Okay, any other comments? Paula?
I do. Hi, it's Holly. Holly Worthington, Turner Lane. Thank you for that information, Larry. It's really helpful. I hope the hostility toward people talking at this meeting goes away, because I can feel it sometimes and it's icky. So I'd just like to point that out. Secondly, I know that anyone who's being hostile won't own that, so I appreciate that, but it just feels icky. We all just need to share and talk, and I'm grateful for everything all of you are doing. I just want to reiterate that that it's really, really important when we do those things that were brought up by the Walkability Committee, which did a fabulous job, just fabulous, that we really make sure that they are aesthetically pleasing, and that from the point of view of a real estate broker, I can tell you that the view of an entrance to a village absolutely affects the property value. I remember a long time ago when parking spaces were painted on Turner Lane, and that immediately would make any buyer looking at Turner Lane think there's a parking problem on this street. This place is painted like a condo parking lot, and it's not a sleepy little lane in a village, and the perception of a buyer becomes very different. So we really, I'm trying to protect your property values. When I say this, we really need to be careful about what we build. Speed bumps are one thing, that's no big deal. But when you start building stuff to slow traffic down, you just need to make sure you do it in a way that's pleasing. And there are very good ways to do that, very good ways. So please call me, because I can tell you whether it would impact a buyer's view. That's what I've been doing most of my life. The second thing I wanted to say is, third thing, sorry, is that I really, really do hope that we will put in place a process for getting ordinances through where there are public forums for the community to comment. I know we've had them, but we really aren't airing the ordinances, even in a mailing. You know, you say email, but people don't read email. I know that from running a brokerage. We just need to really get the ordinances out there so people can comment. I think you'd hash out, in the way Jeff mentioned, much more of the community feedback. You'd get it out quickly, and then you can move forward and get productive rather than having to hear people pick at what they don't like. You'd get it done all at once in an efficient way. I think that's critical to the respect the council keeps from the community. Critical. I can't beg you enough for that. So thank you all for your hard work. I will be quiet now. I bet you can't wait.
Would anyone else like to speak?
Yeah.
Paula?
Yeah, I would.
First of all, I hope that the council in some way shows some kindness and appreciation to the outgoing arborist who has stood by the Village of Martin's additions with such loyalty and such generosity for so many years. And Holly, to add to your remark about community forums, Arthur, you will remember probably, and I of course can't remember how long ago it was, but I want to say in 2013 or 2014, we had a community forum, or at least one of them, to discuss trees in the Village of Martin's additions and to talk about the emerging science about urban forests and trees. And that said, Ron and Arthur, I hope that you will broaden, broaden the definition of trees to be planted in the ordinance to not only include canopy trees, which by most people's definitions are trees that will grow to be 40 feet or greater in height, and that can't really be suitably planted in many of these new construction sites that have dry wells, which limit the height of the tree and the type of tree that's planted. But I would hope that the language would include understory trees and maybe native trees, because those are the trees that actually give us the best environmental bang for the buck.
So, a quick question there. In the draft, I say canopy trees, but you would suggest an approved list of native trees, not necessarily canopy.
Yeah, I would say maybe native understory and canopy trees. I think I would just broaden it. I would just broaden it out. It gives us a lot more latitude.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so has everyone had a chance to speak now? Okay.
Lynn? I promise this will be really easy.
Yes.
Hi, Lynn.
Hi. I listened in to the last walkability meeting, during which there was a citation to a 2017-2018 traffic study. If that's incorporated into the report which you approved tonight, I think that the traffic study is really obsolete, in as much as we've had a pandemic. There's been a tremendous change in commuter traffic. There's been a tremendous change in truck traffic, package deliveries, food service deliveries, grocery truck deliveries. We're in a different world since the pandemic, and we need a new traffic study to reflect what's going on today and what's possibly coming up in the future. At the tail end of the report, permission was asked to include Oxford Street. We have been here, part of the village, for a long time. We're kind of short. There's only 5 listed households on Oxford Street. There's 7 on Melville that was included in the report, but Oxford was, there was permission asked to include it, and I don't think anybody on Oxford Street has ever asked that the tail wag the dog, but we would like the dog to recognize that there is a tail, and it is down here on Oxford Street, and in the future to not exclude us. I'm feel constrained and nervous because of this 2-minute limit. There are other things that I felt I wanted to talk about, but I'm going to abide by the 2-minute and maybe be able to cheer in again at some other time and try to take up part of another 2 minutes.
Thank you, Lynn, and please feel free to email and call as we've...
I have sent emails, and here's one other. I have a question. There was during the presentation of the at the walkability meeting, I felt there was a great deal of put down citing Robert's Rules of Orders. So I have a question. Where and what within Robert's Rules of Order would allow something from a guy on the ground, somebody who has a comment or a suggestion as to might just be for the betterment of his little corner of the world, but something that might apply to the whole village? And how can that be incorporated and made a part of the permanent record? Because all I heard was, no, that doesn't fit within Robert's Rules of Order. I sent an email which I put a lot of heart and soul into. The most difficult thing for me to do is to compose words and put it into writing so it's comprehensible. I don't have a great gift of putting words on paper, but I did this and I sent it forward. There was not even a comment made on it. It was apparently, you know, not within the Robert's Rules of Order, and there's apparently no reference to what I submitted. It's very frustrating for a resident to be shut down this way. I would like to know how I can feel I'm making a contribution to the community and not get shut down.
Well, we'll certainly look into that, but you're talking about the walkability study, and I know that they had like a 2-hour meeting, and Robert's rules typically do govern meetings, and with regard to the 2-minute time limit, that's always been the limit on council meetings, and I think they tried to enforce that in their meetings as well. It's just the way that we can get work done as the council. And so
I understand that. I waited till the end for this comment section. I am probably feel as weary or probably more weary than all the rest of you. And I certainly appreciate all the effort that has gone into this walkability study, Peter Kahn. I think you're a giant to have accepted the chairmanship of this job and to try to rein in the wild herd of cats that had to be brought in and teamed in order to put some coherence into this whole thing, and I think you did a good job in doing that, and I think it's consistent with the way you addressed the 5G subject a couple of years back when that was an issue, which I guess it still will be, and so I do appreciate that. I'll sign off now. Thank you. And I do appreciate a 2-minute limit. I know I've gone over 2 minutes, and I appreciate you're not cutting me off. Thank you very much. Please do take into consideration that what I say is heartfelt, and I feel I'm trying to make a contribution to the community. I would like to have some recognition sometime. I don't want my name up in a plaque. I just, either this is something, it just goes silent. I put stuff out there for years and it goes silent.
If I could just chime in here, please. I know that you have been one of the most loyal attendees of council meetings over the last, I don't know, probably 7 or 8 years at least that I've been going. So I know that you have made many comments and they are appreciated. We're just getting a lot of comments from a lot of people who often go over, and that's why sometimes it may feel a little bit rushed and some people may characterize it as hostile, but I'm just trying to keep things moving because that is my charge.
I fully agree.
And it may help to note, Mr. Willie, Ron Bolt speaking, if you submitted a letter, it is part of the record.
Well, I got the very that it was not. I sent it to all the council members and the village manager, and I was given the very clear impression that such submissions were outside of the Robert's Rules of Order and not included in a permanent record.
Well, it's not really Robert's Rules of Order that would apply. It would be the Maryland Open Meetings Act and the Public Information Act. It would be a public record, right, Ron?
Yeah, that's right. Anything that's submitted to the council is a public record generally.
And actually, I'm looking at it right now. I have it right here in my list of items. So it's
right. In my statement there, the greatest emphasis I put on walkability was on sidewalks. You've mentioned vegetation and you've talked about maintenance. But one of the great violators of usability of the sidewalks by the nannies with their strollers, by the younger tots use it, with their little wheeled vehicles. The older ones are out on the street with their bicycles. There's the people that walk their dogs. But to me, the great violator of trespassing on sidewalk space are vehicles that park in a driveway and they are partially or wholly blocking the sidewalk. and people have to walk around. In weather like this, it happens. And then what is someone supposed to do? Walk down into the street where there's a pile of snow? It shouldn't happen in any time under the most ideal, 80 degrees weather, low humidity. Somebody should not have to leave the sidewalk because there's a vehicle blocking any part of it. And I would like to see that, something done about that, so that when it happens, a call could be made and it's corrected.
Okay, thank you, Lynn. Have a good evening. Okay,
Thank you.
do we have anyone else who has not spoken?
Can you hear me? This is John Sherrow.
Hi, John.
I want to go back to the safety issue. Maybe I'm missing something. Are we not getting all the reports that these things may be happening in the village and maybe adjacent villages in our monthly newsletters?
That all what things?
Pardon me?
That all
other
what
words,
things?
I don't know. It seems like there might be some safety issues that's going on that I may not be aware of or I've not heard about.
Well, yeah, I can speak to that well, we used to have police come to every council meeting, and one of the things they did was summarize the precinct reports. Police stopped coming to regular meetings when we stopped having regular police patrols. And then the two people that we have would occasionally come and report on things that would have been an interest, but we never, I'd say in the last 10 years, we have not been getting regular precinct reports.
Okay, well, I understand that, but the issue is that if something's happening in the village and the residents are not being made aware of it, via newsletter or email or whatever. I'm just questioning this because it seems like Arthur's summary of what the safety committee is going to investigate or that move in that direction. Am I wrong, Arthur?
No, I think there's just a sense, a feeling that things are happening that are of concern. Some of it is well-founded, some of it is based on solid stuff, some of it is in the air. With today's technologies, you get a kidnapping in Minnesota and people feel like it's in their backyard. And there's a sense that things are unsafe even though the country is safer than it's been in generations. So there's the sense is there. I don't think it's the local precinct or things that are being reported. It's just, I don't know, it's kind of out there. That's as much as I know.
Well, thank you for the explanation. So therefore, we don't have to build in our security systems or bring out our own shotguns, correct?
No shotguns, please.
Thank you. Thank you for the time.
Thank you. Does anyone else have a comment who hasn't spoken yet?
Susan, before you adjourn the meeting, I just had a quick comment, but maybe just see if there's any other resident that wants to go before I make my quick point.
Hasn't spoken yet. No,
Lynn Welly again, very quickly on the big tree that was removed.
Yeah.
Not knowing where the property line, I would suggest that before the builder gets in there and does all this nasty stuff, a survey drawing can be done to include the location of this type of vegetation, these large trees. And if any portion of that tree is in the public right-of-way, then he can't touch it.
Right.
And put a fence around it and say no trespassing.
Lynn,
it's very simple.
So just so that you're aware, when they submitted their plans, they did identify where the tree was. That was what that's what we went on when they started, since they don't have to. So under the current rules, they don't have to tell us that they're removing a tree necessarily, but they have to indicate on their plans where all the trees are. So that
with regard to the property line?
Exactly. So it's included because they have to include the property line for other things. So it's all in the same plans. So
then on this drawing for this property, the illustration would have shown whether that tree, any part of it, was in the public right of way?
Correct.
And was it?
No, it was not in the public right of way.
Could the village still have put a condition on the permit that tree has to stay?
So under the way the code is now, no. So the way the code is now, no. The village does not regulate private trees under the code as is now.
That's unfortunate, especially when it's such a gentle giant, which provides so much benefit, and it's a horrible loss. You know, it's not $750; it's thousands of dollars. If you have an appraiser come out and give you an appraisal of that property with or without the tree, it's probably $15,000 to $25,000. That's what's been lost, in addition to all the environmental benefits which are now there in sawdust. I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
I do have a comment. May I speak tonight?
Sure.
Thank you. I want to second Lynn's comment just now about the value of a mature tree, and you know, it takes 50 years, 100 years to replace a tree like that. And I do think that the environmental benefits are tremendous, and the environmental loss is equally tremendous. But what I want to go back to is the notion about public record, because you know, you say that something's been submitted, it's on the public record, but from the residents' point of view, it does sort of look like it disappears into the cosmic ozone. And I want to reiterate a suggestion that's been made since I think last October, which is that the village set up a message board where all of these comments on all of these issues can in fact be put in public so people can go see what's on the message board. Because I'm very interested in what other residents have to say about, all of these issues, tree issues and safety issues and all of that. I would really like to see VMA have a mechanism, a public message board, and not burden the listserv, which of course really doesn't handle it terribly well anyway, but to have a message board where we can all see each other's comments, not just send something to the council and have it disappear into a file somewhere, but have it on a public message board where we can have a community conversation. Because I think one of the things residents have been feeling strongly is that the community's not getting that shared information, whether it's on safety issues or crime or, we had 15, 20 different vandalism incidents in November, and the listserv is not the right place for that. We need a community message board where we can post everything. Comments about the ethics ordinance, comments about the election, comments about, ways to improve this. I mean, some of them are fun comments. Like, I love the idea of having kids' art projects up in the village, windows. I love the idea of having the kids do interviews with some of our elders and putting that on something where people have access to it. Because sending something to the council does, I have to tell you, to echo this, does often feel like you're sending it into the cosmic ozone because you never hear back. And Arthur, I commend you for responding to Lauren Beal's proposal about the tree ordinance. That was really positive, responsive action. And, good stuff came out of that because you did respond. But a lot of things just seem to disappear. And so I think a public message board is really an essential community service. And local government exists to provide community service. We don't need legislation. We don't need a whole lot of new ordinances. But we do need basic functioning government here in the sense of serving the community. There's a need for community conversations and discussions. The forums, I think, are essential on every ordinance and on any other, proposals that come up. Community ordinances are not the only thing that require community forums. And a message board is kind of an ongoing community forum where we can all talk to each other. Because I do want to hear from my fellow residents. I think we have a lot of smart people, and we need a mechanism where we can talk to each other. And again, a message board is the way to do that. Thank you.
Okay.
Well, I think at some point we set up a Facebook page for Martin's Editions.
Yeah, I was involved in that, and it didn't work very well because people don't want to be on Facebook because of various conditions that Facebook does with your data. Facebook is not the mechanism. I think you need a message board. Kind of like what the county public works people have about the library project, where any resident can put a note up on that library project message board, and you have a community conversation about the future of the Chevy Chase Library on a public message board where everybody can see each other's comments. It's not just sending a comment to the government agency, it's sending a comment to a message board for a community discussion. And like I said, we have smart people in Martin's Editions. I want to hear what they say. We have a lot of good ideas in this community. And Facebook is not the right mechanism, but a message board is something that a lot of government agencies do provide. Sometimes they're project specific and sometimes they're just general, good ideas welcome.
Okay, so those would be well-staffed agencies. Does anyone else have a comment?
Larry has his hand up again.
Can Larry please keep it to a minute at this point, please? A minute.
Oh, it's 1 minute. I have a question to
Thank
Arthur.
you.
Arthur, when you're doing this tree canopy thing, I was able to select the tree that went into the right of way near my house, and I picked and not a willow oak. What is the other one with the thin leaves oak to put in there? And the reason I picked it is because it does not put shoots out where the utility lines are. If you drive down Thornapple Street, I was thinking what Holly Worthington said about how things look attractive or not. If you drive down Thornapple Street entering and you see what has been done to those trees and how awful they look, they just weren't right to put under utility lines. And I think that's a huge consideration when you're picking a tree.
That's right. Well, there is a policy now. You know, you put the appropriate size, right tree, right place is the phrase they use. That sometimes the utility lines came after the tree. Sometimes bad trees were put in, but now there's a great consciousness of where to put what kind of a tree. But you're right. And there was we did have an approved list, and I think we'll probably go back to that. I was trying to be less bureaucratic, but maybe you should have to put limits in there. So thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks. Anyone else?
I would just like to add one final comment, which is an appreciation for Paul Wolf as our arborist for as long as I can remember, and his willingness to come. Basically, you know, he was here after storms before anybody even had to call him, and I think his service was really commendable. And I would like to see the council. I am recommending that the council have some kind of, I don't know if you want to have a farewell recognition for him or something to, I mean, I don't even know how many years, 20 years, how long he's had that contract. I think it will be quite a blow to him to lose the contract, and I think that he deserves recognition. He used to bring pumpkins and distribute pumpkins at Halloween. He did a lot for this community, including being very, very available. I think we were very blessed to have that level, that caliber of service. And I appreciated his work very much, and I hope the council will recognize that. Thank you.
I agree. All right. Jeff had a quick comment, I believe he said.
Pretty brief. Thank you, Susan, for recognizing me. I appreciate it. I do promise to make it brief. It's been a long evening, and just a couple comments. First, again, I want to thank the residents, and I appreciate that, you know, every meeting that I've been as a new council member has always gone over time. And I say that in the best spirit, is that we have an incredibly engaged community. And I think there are ways to think about harnessing this so that we don't feel that we have to cram stuff in at the end. We have to cut people off. I think we can work together to figure out a relatively straightforward way that we can continue these conversations in between council meetings so our residents feel and council doesn't feel that we're trying to cram it in. We're always running late, but I think we can do that. The couple points I want to make, just put them out there. I promise they're quick. First, Todd, if you're not asleep, I know that it's, and I'm saying that only because it's late, but I just want to put out there, you know, again, and maybe Susan, you have some insight. So there's first a question and then a comment. So the first is on the elections. Between now and the next council meeting, there will be an issue for candidates to submit, right? And I just put this out there as just a process of openness and sharing. Is we have, I don't think it's an unusual situation, because Susan, I think you were last year the liaison to the election committee, and you ran as an incumbent. So I just wanted
liaisons. I'm now the liaison to the election committee, if that's your question.
Okay, so that. Oh, did you announce that previously, or how did? Okay, so
yeah,
you're announcing.
It's been announced. Yes.
Okay, so you've replaced Todd then as the liaison.
Correct.
Okay, well that answers. Okay,
we're doing this election free, fair, and open. No problem.
No, I appreciate that. I wasn't aware of that, so I think that's really great that you proactively remedied that potential situation. The other piece I wanted to throw out there, and again, it's something based upon what Todd had mentioned, specifically about the issue of guardrails when it came up with the safety committee, and then also safety task force, excuse me, and then very specifically the amazing work
and comments that Todd, Arthur, and Ron had at the last meeting, very specific to the ethics ordinance that will be coming up next week. And I know that we have a public forum, but again, it's at the same time that we are then expected to perhaps have a vote on adoption. So I just want to put out a very quick point, which is I want to commend all the research that Ron has done, the comment that Todd had made at the last time, the general question of, do you believe we need something to address complaints? And then Arthur's comment around, you know, the idea that this won't, we have other things. What happens if something comes up that isn't an ethical issue? So I just want to put out there that I've looked at this very deeply, and I've also looked at other options that other local municipalities done. I just want to throw a suggestion, just so you folks can think about it, which is that all complaints, ethical or anything else, would first go to the council, and then it's up to the council to decide that they would refer it to the ethics committee for further action, whether it's because it's recusal or there's a conflict. But that way you keep at least the first level within the elected officials. We do our job. And then if there's an exception, like we've had 3 in 5 years, or something else, then we simply refer, and we have that mechanism. And I think, quite frankly, that addresses all the research that's been done. I think the big question that Todd brought up last week around, do you believe that we need something around complaints? And then Arthur, your very thoughtful component around, well, this only addresses ethics, but not everything else. I think by simply having that, it goes to the council first, and then for whatever reason, if the council decides they refer it to the ethics committee, I think it addresses everything in a nice shiny bow. So with that, I want to turn it over and wish everyone a great evening. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And on that note, I would like to correct a misstatement that was made on the record at last month's meeting. An allegation was made that, and in a separate email, an allegation was made that there was a breach of the voter roll procedure. This was very concerning. The resident seemed very distraught about it, very concerned, and we took this very seriously, have investigated and have established that the document, which was supposed to have been adhered to and was allegedly not followed per election committee procedure last year, the document was actually not authentic. It was not properly adopted. Most of the officials who would have had to have seen it had not ever seen it, and so the charge was spurious. And so I want to reassure everyone that we do take our open, fair elections very seriously in VMA, and will continue to do so. So with that, the record is corrected from last month's comments, and I think we could adjourn. Would anyone like to so move?
I will move to adjourn.
Second? Jeff, okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Good night.
Good night.
Everybody.
Good night.